Facts don't change minds. Anyone involved in social sciences can tell you that. But there are some methods out there that have been tried and tested to guide public opinion in a certain direction. Have you ever heard about Edward Bernays? He was the nephew of Sigmund Freud, the Austrian psychologist, and he was very good at his job. In fact, he was so good at getting the US to join World War I that Joseph Goebbels, who was Hitler's minister for propaganda, became one of his biggest fans. It's quite unbelievable, isn't it? But get this, Bernays later became known as the father of American public relations. Oh, and if you're having bacon for breakfast today, you can thank Edward Bernays for that too. I'm serious, it's well documented, you can look it up. And you know what else is unbelievable? We as humans are very easy manipulated, and it doesn't matter if it's for political gain or for commercial purposes. And here's the thing, there's a catch. The methods used to manipulate people are actually well known and researched. And even better, they leave traces behind, traces that can be identified by those who know what to look for. But you don't have to take my word for it. The Pentagon wrote in 2016 that perceptions can become reality and that first impressions influence perceptions and judgments, which bias how individuals process subsequent information. In other words, our initial impressions, especially when they were linked to strong emotions like the iconic crash of the Twin Towers, can create a bias that affects how we think about something, even if we receive new information that contradicts those initial impressions. Nobel Prize laureate Daniel Kahneman calls this System 1 in his book Thinking Fast and Slow. For me as behavior analyst, it's a cognitive bias, one of many, that ingrains itself deeper and deeper in the brain each time the initial information is reinforced, as is the case with 9/11 to this day. That's why facts don't change minds. Once primed, people only see what they want to see, and not because they choose so, but because it's a powerful subconscious process. There are both psychological and physiological reasons for this phenomenon, but that's a discussion for another day. And here's the deal. If you're trying to make an argument and someone just flat out rejects it, even if it's an argument based on solid evidence, or worse, if they straight up call you a conspiracy theorist, don't take it personally. The person probably can't help it. They've just fallen victim to a strong cognitive bias that may or may not have been intentionally created using some really sophisticated psychological methods. And let's be real, who wants to admit that about themselves? Another great example is of course the January 6th insurrection of the US Capitol by people who genuinely believed what they were fed by Fox News, that is, that the elections were stolen and that Donald Trump had actually won. These people rejected any reason in the face of overwhelming evidence to the contrary. Behavior analysts call this the recency and primacy bias. So while it's clear that facts don't change minds, they might trigger a thought process that eventually could lead to an awakening. The following interview with Richard Gage was created with this aim in mind. For those who don't know him yet, Richard is the founder of Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth, which is now more than 3,600 members strong, and he has spent the last 18 years focused on one goal. That is a new and independent investigation of what really happened on September 11, 2001. And Richard is not alone. Architects, engineers, lawyers, victims' relatives, firefighters and police investigators all demand the same thing. And all of them are vilified, ridiculed and antagonized for doing so. But why is that? Why, after more than 20 years, is the official version of events surrounding the collapse of the 3 World Trade Center buildings still not fully accepted? Well, there are a number of factors that have contributed to this ongoing skepticism. Unanswered questions, denial, glaring inconsistencies in the official narrative, and a growing mistrust in government and institutional authorities are a good starting point to understand the situation. Many things happened today, too many to discuss them all in one short interview. But here are 4 compelling facts for which so far no satisfactory explanation has been given. 1. The symmetric collapse of Building 7, which was not hit by a plane, remains unexplained by the official narrative. According to a whole range of experts, the building fell in a manner only consistent with controlled demolition. All 3 World Trade Center buildings that collapsed did so, at least partially, in free fall velocity. Any first-grade student of physics can explain why this is an impossibility. Isaac Newton would turn in his grave if he heard this. 3. Countless eyewitness accounts from first responders and survivors and video evidence report explosions occurring in the lower levels of the Twin Towers and World Trade Center 7 before the collapse.
You want to call your mother or something?
We made it at least 2 blocks, and we started running. Floor by floor, it started popping out.
It was if they had detonated.
Yeah,
if
detonated.
they were planned to take down a building. Boom, 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 boom.
What happened?
We was in an explosion. We was in the lobby, and the 3rd explosion, the whole lobby collapsed on us.
What was it like? What was it like?
Horrible.
It's like hell. You don't want to know.
The whole building just collapsed on us inside the lobby.
Was that a secondary explosion?
Yes, it was.
That was the planet probably?
Yeah, definitely secondary explosion. Because we was inside waiting to go upstairs, and on the way upstairs, the whole fucking plane blew. And we just collapsed on everybody inside the lobby.
Similar to the first tower coming down, secondary?
I don't know about the first one, but I know the second one was terrible. Then there was a 3rd one too after that one.
Third explosion after that?
Yes, sir. Everybody was inside the building, waiting to go upstairs. And they just let loose. Everything just let loose inside the building.
So what you told me is that there was a plane or whatever hit the building, then a secondary explosion.
It was like 3 explosions after that. We came in after the fire. We came when the fire was going on already. We was in the staging area inside the building.
4. The temperature of jet fuel cannot reach the temperature necessary to melt or significantly weaken steel, let alone create the lava streams described by many firefighters. This raises questions about how the building collapsed as quickly and completely as they did.
Reporting here from Times Square, I am standing next to Rudy Dent. He's a 32-year veteran of the New York City Fire Department. He's worked as well with the New York City Police Department. And you retired right after 9/11. He was there on 9/11. He saw World Trade Center Tower 7 come down. Rudy, tell us about what happened that day.
Well, I was off that day, and I received a call at home, and I got to see both buildings come down on TV. I jumped on my motorcycle. I did about 120 miles an hour across the Tappan Zee. I reported to my firehouse, and then I got my gear. A bunch of us got together. We commandeered a mail truck, and we made our way down to the site. At that time, Building 7 was still up. I saw Building 7 come down. My fellow firefighters who were there, they did that involuntary jerk when a loud explosion goes off. You know, you can't help it, and they did. I'm a Vietnam veteran too, so I kind of didn't jump like they did, but there was an explosion. The building did come down in complete classical controlled demolition. It came down on its own footprint. There's no question.
And then talk to me a little bit, obviously, as a professional in the fire department for 30 plus years, they're saying that blaming it on office fires, just a few office fires.
Well, if it wasn't so serious a situation, that would be completely laughable. That is ridiculous. First of all, our guys were up there. They were calling for additional hand lines to mop up the isolated pockets of fire. And let me just explain one thing. Never in the history of the world, never in the history of high-rise skyscrapers has ever a skyscraper ever come down because of fire. And I'm talking massive fire. And you know the reason why? Because fire does not burn by itself hot enough to compromise and melt steel.
You see molten steel running down the channel rails, like you're in a foundry.
Yeah,
like lava.
What we had in the World Trade Center, and I saw myself, was molten lava-like pockets of molten steel. All right, I spent the night on the pile searching for bodies, and I saw that with my own eyes. So who are you going to believe? Are you going to believe a bunch of government bureaucrats or my fellow brothers, which I lost 343 guys that day? And I lost Tommy O'Hagan, Bruce Van Hines, and Kenny Kumpel. And I can never forget that. I think of that before I go to bed. I think about it the first thing in the morning when I wake up. And it's in honor of them and their family that I will continue to do everything I can to make the rest of the world wake up to the fact that this was a false flag operation.
Right.
And why is all of this still relevant today? That's a question I've asked Richard in the interview, so I will not preempt his response here. But I will say that when the US invaded Iraq, a staggering 85% of the soldiers believed they were there to retaliate for Saddam's role in 9/11. They even painted the Twin Towers and the Pentagon on their helmets. No wonder they killed 1 million Iraqis and, by Madeleine Albright's own admission, happily starved 500,000 Iraqi children to death.
We have heard that 500,000 children have died. I mean, that's more children than died in Hiroshima. And you know, is the price worth it? We think the price is worth it.
Imagine if any other nation on earth would have done this to the US. Today, of course, we know that Saddam was not involved in attacks. On the contrary, he was a natural arch-enemy of Al-Qaeda and killed them wherever he found them. Tragically, anyone with a basic understanding of the Middle East would have been able to point it out. And coming back to what I've said at the beginning, if 85% of the world's most powerful military believed something so blatantly false and obviously incorrect, what does that tell us about the human propensity for falling victim for manipulation and cognitive biases? So, as you can see, what we believe, or better what we are made to believe, rightly or wrongly, can have devastating consequences. Keep this in mind when you listen to all those who are priming us for the coming wars with Russia and, more importantly, China.
In order to protect the American people, readiness now and readiness in the future through modernization is our number one priority, and there is no other number one. Right now, the international system is under stress. For the first time in our nation's history, the United States is facing two major nuclear powers whose vital national security interests are in competition with the United States. Both the People's Republic of China and Russia have the means to threaten our interests and our way of life.
This is why people like Richard are so important. Critical thinking and skepticism are necessary components of a healthy democracy, especially in the so-called post-truth era in which we are finding us today. You don't have to agree with him, but some of Richard's arguments deserve to be looked in an objective manner, bypassing the strong emotional hold that the initial information still may exert on our beliefs. And while you may be forgiven to think that the people contesting the official narrative about 9/11 are a fringe minority, the reality is actually different. According to an article in the Times, 42% of Americans and up to 65% of the population of a host of other countries do not believe the official story. So in this interview we will explore different explanations for the collapse of the World Trade Center buildings, especially Building 7. To set the stage, I would like to start with a powerful image coming from a recent Dutch documentary. Remember those images that we have all got burnt into our minds? The ones where those giant planes are smashing into the towers? Yeah, those ones. Over the years we have seen them over and over again on TV, and a lot of the footage was shot with Taylor lenses. But here's the thing. In reality, the relationship between the towers and the airplanes is a little different than what it looks like in close-up. Take a look at this. It's a scale model of the Twin Towers and the airplanes that hit them. And here's the question. Can the velocity of the plane and the fuel it carried really bring down the entire tower in the way that it did?